Hello viewers, welcome to my YouTube channel where stories come alive. Don't forget to subscribe. Let's begin.
The morning Margaret said those words, I was standing in my kitchen making coffee, still wearing Harold's old cardigan, the one with the frayed left cuff I could never bring myself to throw away. The house was quiet in that particular way it gets at 7 a.m. in autumn, when the light comes through the bay window at an angle that turns everything amber and soft. I had earned that quiet. 41 years of earning it, actually. My son Daniel had called the night before to say he and his wife Priya were coming for Sunday brunch. I'd been delighted. I'd made my grandmother's apple cake, set the good plates, even put fresh flowers in the little blue vase by the window. I was 71 years old and I still knew how to make a table beautiful. They arrived at 10. Priya walked in first, which was unusual, and she didn't hug me the way she normally did. She walked past me into the living room, and then she kept walking, into the dining room, down the hallway, peering into the study, touching the door frames with her fingertips like she was appraising livestock. Daniel came in behind her, and he had that look on his face, the one I'd learned to dread over the past 3 years, the look that said I already agreed to this and I'm sorry and please don't make it harder than it has to be. House is lovely, isn't it? Priya said. Not a question. She was standing at the base of the staircase now, looking up at the landing with its window seat where Daniel used to read as a boy. It is, I said carefully. Would you like coffee? The cake just came out. My mother would love it here, Priya continued, still not looking at me. She's been struggling so much since my father passed. The apartment isn't working anymore. She needs space. She turned then and her eyes were calm, not cold exactly. Just settled the way someone's eyes look when they've already rehearsed the conversation and know exactly how it ends. We're moving in, Sandra, the three of us. We'll take the master and give Mummy the guest suite. You've got that lovely little room off the kitchen. No, I said. The word came out before I'd fully decided to say it. Clean and simple. One syllable that filled the whole kitchen. Priya blinked. Daniel closed his eyes briefly like a man bracing for a wave. Mum, he said. No, I said again, and this time I pulled out a chair and sat down, because my legs had gone a little unreliable and I didn't want anyone to notice. Sit down, both of you. Have some cake. I want to tell you something about that house before I go further because it matters. Harold and I bought it in 1987 when Daniel was 4 and I was still working double shifts at the hospital to cover our mortgage. It was a wreck when we got it. The previous owners had painted every room brown, brown walls, brown ceilings, brown trim, and the garden was nothing but weeds and one angry rosebush that scratched anyone who came near it. Harold said he saw potential. I thought he'd lost his mind. But we fixed it. Room by room, year by year, Saturday by Saturday with paint-stained hands and arguments about crown molding, and too much laughter for two people covered in plaster dust. We raised Daniel in that house. We brought him home from the hospital to that house. I sat up with him through fevers in that house. Harold died in our bedroom in that house, 3 years ago in February, holding my hand, with the winter light coming through the curtains we'd picked out together at a market in Portugal the summer before he got sick. That house is not just a house. It is the physical shape of my life. I understand Priya's mother is struggling, I said, once they were seated and I had poured the coffee and cut the cake, because I was raised to be a good hostess even in the middle of a war. I am genuinely sorry for her loss. Losing a husband is. I stopped, took a breath. I know what it is. Priya had the grace to look down at that. But this is my home. My name is on the deed. Harold and I built this life here, and I intend to continue living it here in my bedroom, in my garden, in my kitchen at 7 in the morning. That is not negotiable. You're here alone, Priya said, and her voice had softened slightly, shifted into something that was almost reasonable. It's such a big house for one person. It makes more sense. For whom? She paused. It makes more sense for whom, Priya? For me, alone is not a problem. I have friends. I have my garden. I have my book club and my Tuesday pottery class and the neighbors I've known for 20 years. Alone and lonely are not the same thing. I am not a burden to be redistributed. Daniel reached across the table then and put his hand over mine. His eyes were wet and that almost broke me because he looks so much like Harold when he's trying not to cry. Mum, he said softly, I should have talked to you first. That was wrong. I'm sorry. Priya stiffened slightly but didn't speak. We've been worried about you, Daniel continued. The house is a lot to maintain, and Priya's mum really is struggling. I think we convinced ourselves it was a solution that worked for everyone, but I should have asked instead of assumed. I squeezed his hand. Yes, I said. You should have. We talked for 3 hours that morning. The apple cake disappeared entirely, which I chose to take as a good sign. I learned things I hadn't known. That Priya's mother, Kamala, had been falling in her apartment. That she'd been eating poorly and sleeping badly and calling Priya at 2 in the morning, frightened and disoriented. That Daniel and Priya were stretched thin, financially, emotionally, trying to support 2 households. That they had been up nights trying to find a solution and had landed on the worst possible version of it, delivered in the worst possible way. I also said things I had been holding for a long time. That Priya had a habit of making decisions that affected me without asking me. That I sometimes felt like a fixture in Daniel's life rather than a person, something to be managed or relocated rather than consulted. That I had tried, for 3 years since Harold died, to be undemanding and cheerful and easy, and that perhaps I had been so successful at it that they'd forgotten I had preferences and feelings and rights. Priya cried. I hadn't expected that. She's not a woman who cries easily. She's sharp and capable, and used to being the most prepared person in any room. But she cried quietly into a paper napkin and said she hadn't realized how it had sounded until she heard me say it back. That she had been so focused on solving the problem that she had turned me into part of the problem without meaning to. That she loved this house because Daniel loved it, and she had somehow imagined that her mother being in it would be a comfort rather than an intrusion. We didn't solve everything that Sunday. These things don't resolve in a single brunch, no matter how good the cake is. What we did do over the following weeks was find a real solution. There's a small cottage 2 streets over from me that came available in November. It's been converted into a proper accessible flat, no steps, wide doorways, a garden that's easy to manage. Kamala moved in just before Christmas. She and I have, against all odds, become something like friends. She grew up in Chennai and she makes a lamb curry that has genuinely changed my life. We have tea on Thursdays. She misses her husband the way I miss mine. That particular ongoing ache of missing someone who was so woven into your daily life that you still turn to tell them things, still reach for them in the dark. Daniel and Priya come for Sunday lunch most weeks. Priya has started asking me things instead of telling me things, and I've started telling her things instead of just absorbing them. It's a small shift, but it has changed everything. Last month she asked my advice about a situation with her boss and actually listened to the answer, and I thought, there you are. There's the relationship we could have been having all along. I still wear Harold's cardigan on autumn mornings. I still make coffee at 7 and watch the light come through the bay window and turn everything amber. The house is still quiet in that particular earned way. But now sometimes on a Thursday afternoon, there's the sound of Kamala's key in the front door. I gave her one for emergencies, and she interprets emergencies broadly, which I have decided to appreciate. And she comes in calling Sandra, I've brought biscuits, and the house isn't quiet anymore, and that turns out to be its own kind of lovely. I said no that morning because this was my home and my life and my right. I said no because I had learned at 71 that love does not require self-erasure. That being a mother and a mother-in-law and a widow does not mean becoming whatever shape is most convenient for the people around you. But I also said no because I believed something better was possible. Not an arrangement that stripped me of my home to solve someone else's problem. Something that actually worked for all of us, that treated all of us as people with lives worth protecting. I was right about that. I usually am. It just took everyone else a little while to catch up. The apple cake recipe, if you're curious, was my grandmother's. 2 cups of flour, 3 apples, a generous hand with the cinnamon. Harold always said it tasted like Sunday. I make it most weeks still. The house smells wonderful for hours afterward, and I sit in it and think, this is mine. All of this is mine, and I am not moving.